My name's Liam, and I'm 33 years old. If you've ever been to a family gathering where tension hums just beneath the laughter, you'll understand the storm that brewed in mine. On the surface, my family looks like the kind you'd see in a holiday movie, smiling for photos, putting up matching decorations, passing food around a long table. But the truth is, those smiles are masked. Underneath them are years of old grudges, petty rivalries, and unspoken bitterness. And at the center of it all is my sister, Chloe. Chloe is 2 years younger than me, and if you asked anyone outside the family, they'd tell you she's charming and outgoing. People at her job adore her. Her friends think she's hilarious. And she's always the one posting polished pictures online about how close-knit we all are. But in reality, Chloe thrives on putting me down. It's been that way since we were kids. If I got a good grade, she'd say it was just because the teacher liked me. If I landed a job, she'd insist it was because I lucked out. And if I ever tried to defend myself, I was told by my parents to let it go because that's just how she is. By the time we were adults, I thought maybe things would settle. I got married to Ethan, the love of my life, and I built a steady career. Chloe never stopped with her little digs, but I had learned to tune most of them out. Still, family dinners always carried this undercurrent of tension. Chloe loved being the star at the table, and if anyone else drew attention, she found a way to cut them down. Our parents enabled it, brushing her words aside as jokes. But deep down, those words left scars. That Christmas, though, something shifted. Ethan and I had flown back from out of state to join everyone for the holiday. My family lives in the same house we grew up in, and walking through that door always made me feel a mix of nostalgia and dread. The smell of cinnamon rolls baking hit me the second we stepped inside, along with the sound of laughter coming from the living room. Chloe was already there, of course, perched on the couch like she owned the place, telling some story that had everyone roaring. The moment she saw me, her eyes flicked to Ethan and then back to me, and that smirk appeared the one that always said, "I'm going to find a way to make you small." Dinner was set up like always, with my mom fussing over the turkey and my dad pouring drinks. The table groaned under the weight of food, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe maybe this year would be different. We all sat down, plates passed, chatter filling the air. I reached for the serving dish of mashed potatoes, and that's when it happened. Chloe's hand shot out, snatching the plate from me. "You don't deserve to eat first in this family," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her tone was mocking, but her eyes glittered with something sharper. The room fell silent for a beat, and then, laughter. My parents chuckled. My cousin snickered. Even an uncle shook his head like it was the funniest thing in the world. My face burned, and for a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But no, she wanted everyone to laugh at me, and they did. I forced a smile and leaned back in my chair. But inside, it felt like something cracked. I'd grown used to Chloe's jabs, but this wasn't just a dig. It was humiliation, served to me on a holiday played in front of everyone I'd ever cared about. And worse, no one stepped in. No one said, "That's too far." They just let her steal the moment and make me the punchline. That's when I noticed Ethan's hand under the table, tightening around mine. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes told me he was furious. And I can't explain the comfort that brought me. At least I wasn't alone in seeing how cruel Chloe had become. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. Because the silence that followed wasn't left to die. My husband, me steady, disciplined, no-nonsense husband shifted in his chair. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just stared at Chloe like she was a problem that needed solving. That was the first time I realized this dinner wouldn't end like all the others. Something was about to break wide open. I leaned back in my chair, trying to play it cool, but inside I was simmering. Chloe had always been a thorn in my side, but there was something about the way she said it this time, the confidence, the complete lack of hesitation that told me she knew she could get away with it. Everyone's laughter only confirmed it. I told myself to breathe, to let it go. But as dinner went on, it was like Chloe had been handed permission to double down. She passed the turkey to my cousin first, skipping right over me. And when Ethan tried to hand me a bread roll, Chloe interrupted with a sharp, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's not starving." Everyone chuckled again, as if she were the evening's comedian. I saw Ethan's jaw tighten, but he stayed polite, pressing the roll into my hand anyway. Mom chimed in to smooth things over, but even her attempt felt lopsided. "Chloe just likes to tease," she said, her tone light. "Liam's always been a little sensitive." That stung more than Chloe's words. Sensitive. That was the label I'd carried since I was a kid. Whenever Chloe went too far, It wasn't that she was cruel. It was that I was sensitive. But in our family, cruel was excusable, and calling it out was the real sin. The rest of dinner followed the same rhythm. Every time I reached for something, Chloe made some snide comment. When I poured myself a drink, she said, "Careful, don't spill. You know how clumsy you are." When I asked someone to pass the cranberry sauce, she muttered, "Why don't you just get up and grab it? You're not the guest of honor here." My cousins laughed. My parents smiled. And I sat there, swallowing down every bitter word that wanted to climb out of my throat. But the thing that really got me wasn't even the insults. It was the favoritism that played out like a script. My parents hung on Chloe's every word, nodding, laughing, asking her about her new job, her apartment, her friends. When I tried to join the conversation, Dad would cut me off or steer it back to Chloe. At one point, I mentioned a project I was proud of at work, and Chloe immediately quipped, "That must have been a slow week if they let you lead it." The table roared. My dad added, "Well, Chloe's got the real leadership skills. She always has." I stared at him, waiting for some sign that he realized how unfair that was. Nothing. Just another sip of wine, another smile at Chloe. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside me, his hand still resting lightly on mine. I knew he wanted to say something, but he also knew how these dinners went. Outsiders weren't supposed to disrupt the family dynamic. That was my battle, and my family had made it clear for years. You either played along, or you became the enemy. What Chloe didn't realize, though, was that the tension in the room wasn't as one-sided as she thought. My husband, Ethan, hadn't said a word since she grabbed that plate from me. He wasn't the kind of man to waste words on nonsense. He sat quietly, his posture straight, eyes scanning the table like he was reading every movement, every smirk, every dismissive shrug. I could feel it building in him, that controlled silence that wasn't passive but deliberate. The same silence I'd seen before when he was weighing his next move. Dessert only made things worse. Mom had baked her famous pie, the one she always said was a family tradition. Chloe announced, "I'll cut the slices." "Don't worry, Liam. You'll get yours last. You're used to it by now." She smirked, knife in hand, enjoying the little gasp of laughter that ran around the table. She served herself the biggest slice, gave generous portions to everyone else, and when she finally slid the smallest sliver onto my plate, she leaned down and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Some of us just deserve more." That whisper rattled through me. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a declaration. Chloe wanted me at the bottom. She wanted me to feel it. And the worst part? Everyone let her. I forced a smile, lifted my fork, and ate that pitiful slice like it didn't bother me. But inside, I was breaking. Every bite tasted like ashes. Every chuckle from the table was another reminder that in their eyes, Chloe was untouchable. I thought back to all the years of being brushed aside. The birthdays where my gifts were overshadowed by hers. The graduations where my achievements were labeled fine, while hers were remarkable. And now here we were, adults, still playing the same script. Only this time, I wasn't alone. When Chloe leaned back in her chair, laughing at one of her own jokes, I caught Ethan's eyes across the table. His gaze wasn't on me. It was locked on Chloe, unblinking, steady, like a hunter watching prey. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. This dinner wouldn't go on like all the others. Not this time. Chloe had always loved an audience. And that night, she had one wrapped around her finger. The more she piled on the jokes at my expense, the more people leaned in, waiting for her next punchline. I tried to ignore it, focusing on Ethan's quiet presence beside me. But then Chloe decided to up the stakes. It started when my mom brought out a photo album, one of those thick, leather-bound books stuffed with pictures from decades past. She loved to do this every holiday, passing it around the table and reminiscing about the good old days. Usually, it was harmless. A shot of me in my awkward middle school haircut, Chloe in her braces years, family trips to the beach. We'd laugh, tell stories, move on. But Chloe saw the album as a weapon. When it got to her, she flipped to a page with me in a wrinkled graduation gown, standing proudly with my diploma. "Oh, look at Liam," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Remember how Mom and Dad almost didn't come to this because I had that soccer game? Priorities, right?" She turned the page before anyone could respond, not even letting me defend myself. She flipped again, landing on a family Christmas picture from years ago. I was off to the side, slightly out of frame. Chloe giggled. Classic. Even the camera knew who mattered. Laughter bubbled around the table. I felt a hot sting behind my eyes, but I clenched my jaw, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Then she did it. The thing that turned the entire room from uncomfortable to unbearable. She flipped to a page I hadn't seen in years. The photos from when I'd broken my arm as a teenager. I'd fallen off my bike, spent weeks in a cast, and missed out on a big summer trip with friends. Chloe tapped the picture of me sitting on the couch, arm in a sling, pale and tired. "Oh, this was the best," she said, eyes shining with glee. "Remember how Liam cried like a baby because he thought he'd never play sports again? He wouldn't stop sobbing. It was pathetic." She laughed, throwing her head back. "Honestly, I think that's when we all realized he wasn't cut out for anything tough." I froze. The laughter around the table was sharper this time, cutting deeper. My parents chuckled. My cousin snorted. Even my uncle muttered, "Yeah, I remember that." Not one person defended me. Not one person said, "That's cruel." Ethan shifted beside me, his hand tightening on my leg. I knew he was seconds away from speaking up, but before he could, Chloe added one more twist of the knife. She leaned closer to the photo, her voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "You know what's funny? I actually told Mom and Dad not to rush you to the hospital right away. I said he's probably exaggerating. He always does." She smiled smugly. "Guess I was right. It was just a little break. Nothing serious." The table erupted in laughter again. But this time, it hit me differently. My chest tightened. My breath caught. All those hours I'd spent in pain. All those nights trying to sleep with my arm throbbing. All the fear that I'd never be the same, and she had convinced them I was exaggerating. That wasn't just teasing. That was betrayal. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to deny it, to tell me Chloe was just joking. But Mom nodded, almost fondly. Chloe did say that. She was always the level-headed one. Dad chuckled. And Liam was always dramatic. Something inside me cracked. It wasn't about the photo anymore. It wasn't even about Chloe's words. It was about realizing, in that single moment, that my pain had never mattered to them. Not then, not now. The people who were supposed to protect me had laughed at me instead. Ethan's hand slid into mine, grounding me, but I could feel him shaking with anger. I glanced at him across the table. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his jaw was clenched tight. His eyes were locked on Chloe, cold and unblinking. For the first time all night, she seemed to notice his stare, because her laughter faltered just for a second. But she quickly recovered, tossing her hair back and flipping to another page as though nothing had happened. I sat there silent, the laughter ringing in my ears. My appetite was gone, my pie untouched. For years, I told myself Chloe's cruelty was just sibling rivalry, just harmless teasing. But in that moment, staring at my family's smiling faces as they laughed at my pain, I knew better. This wasn't rivalry. It was a game to them. A game where I was always the punchline, and Chloe always walked away the winner. But this time, I wasn't alone. The photo album closed with a snap, but the echo of laughter hung in the air like smoke after a fire. I couldn't even look at the table anymore. My fork rested on my plate, untouched, while everyone else kept chatting as if nothing had happened. To them, Chloe's cruelty was just entertainment. To me, it was a reminder that no matter what I did, no matter how far I'd come, I'd always be the expendable one in their story. I sat there staring at the pine garland running down the center of the table, listening to the clink of silverware and the hum of conversation. My chest felt heavy, like someone had stacked weights on it. It wasn't the first time Chloe had gone too far, but something about this night made it unbearable. Maybe it was because Ethan was watching it unfold. Maybe it was because my husband, who commanded respect from soldiers every day, was seeing me treated like a joke by my own blood. Or maybe it was because I finally saw the truth I'd been avoiding. My family wasn't going to change. I excused myself quietly, slipping out of my chair and heading toward the bathroom. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked where I was going. They just kept eating, laughing, moving on without me as if I were background noise. I shut the bathroom door behind me, leaning against it for support. My reflection in the mirror startled me. My face was pale, my eyes red-rimmed, my shoulders hunched like I was carrying years of invisible baggage. I gripped the sink and whispered to myself, "Why am I even here?" That question hung in the air like a challenge. Why was I here? To be humiliated? To let my sister strip me of dignity in front of everyone I grew up with? For years, I told myself it was my duty, that family was family, and I had to show up, no matter how badly it hurt. But standing in that bathroom, I realized I didn't owe them my presence if all they ever gave me in return was pain. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Ethan. "Liam, are you okay?" His voice cracked something in me, but I forced my tone steady. "Yeah, just need a minute." There was a pause, Then his quiet reply, "Take all the time you need. I'm here." I closed my eyes, pressing my palms against the cool porcelain sink. Ethan had never asked me to stop coming to these dinners. Even though I knew he hated them, he came for me. He endured Chloe's smug little comments and my parents' favoritism for me. And now he was standing outside that door, ready to back me no matter what. That's when the thought came, small at first, but growing stronger the more I let it linger. Maybe I didn't have to play this game anymore. Maybe I didn't have to sit quietly while Chloe sharpened her claws on me year after year. Maybe walking away wasn't weakness. Maybe it was strength. I straightened up, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror again. I didn't look like the boy in those old photos Chloe had mocked. I wasn't that scared kid waiting for someone else to stand up for me. I was a grown man with a life, a career, and a husband whose very presence radiated authority. Why was I still seeking approval from people who had shown me time and time again that they'd never give it? When I returned to the table, the conversation had shifted. Chloe was bragging about her new promotion, everyone nodding and praising her. Nobody even acknowledged my absence. Ethan gave me a soft smile when I sat back down, slipping his hand into mine under the table. That was all I needed to ground me. I didn't say a word for the rest of the meal. I let them talk over me, let Chloe bask in the spotlight, let my parents beam at her like she was the sun in their sky. Outwardly, I looked calm, but inside, my thoughts were moving with precision. Years of being the quiet one had taught me something Chloe would never understand: patience. She craved instant gratification, immediate applause. Me? I could wait. I knew then that my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy, because every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every instance of favoritism had stacked into a tower inside me. And towers, when they fall, don't come down gently. As the night dragged on, I forced myself to smile when spoken to, nod at the right times, and pretend nothing was wrong. But in my head, I was cataloging everything. Every insult, every smirk, every time someone looked away instead of stepping in. My family thought they were winning. They didn't realize they were giving me exactly what I needed: the clarity to finally stop hoping things would change. When we got into the car later, Ethan didn't press me with questions. He just squeezed my hand and said softly, "You don't have to keep putting yourself through this." For the first time, I believed him. The car ride home that night was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of silence that made me uneasy. It was steady, thoughtful, like the calm before a storm. Ethan held my hand the whole way, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a small, grounding rhythm. He drove, his eyes fixed on the road, his jaw still set tight. He hadn't spoken much during dinner, but I knew from the way he looked at Chloe that steady, cold stare that he saw everything. And he wasn't the type to forget. When we got back to our house, I collapsed on the couch, exhausted from more than just the travel and the long evening. I felt wrung out, like my family had drained every ounce of dignity from me. But Ethan sat down beside me, leaning against my shoulder, and whispered, "You're not who they say you are. You never were." It's strange how a single sentence can plant itself in your mind and grow roots. I'd spent years letting Chloe's words define me: dramatic, clumsy, sensitive, weak. But sitting there with Ethan, surrounded by the home I'd built, I realized those labels weren't mine to carry. They were hers to throw and mine to refuse. Over the next few months, something shifted in me. I didn't announce it. I didn't even talk about it much. But slowly, I started investing more in myself and my life. At work, I stopped shying away from leadership opportunities. When my boss asked me to lead a new project, I said yes without hesitation. I worked hard, delivered results, and for the first time, people saw me not as someone filling space, but as someone worth following. Ethan noticed it first. "You walk differently now," he said one morning as I grabbed my bag for work. "Straighter, like you're not carrying their weight anymore." He was right. The more I poured myself into building the life I wanted, the less my family's voices echoed in my head. When Chloe made little digs during our rare phone calls, "Wow, must be nice to finally be doing something useful," they didn't sting anymore. They just sounded small. Ethan had his own way of reminding me who I really was. One Saturday morning, we were out for a run, and I lagged behind, grumbling about being out of shape. He slowed down, looked at me, and said, "Stop comparing yourself to them. You're running your own race." Coming from him, a man who had trained soldiers and knew what endurance looked like, it stuck. With their support, I started to thrive financially, emotionally, even physically. Ethan and I bought a condo in a quiet neighborhood, a place that felt like ours, not just a space we existed in. We traveled together, explored new places, and created memories that had nothing to do with the shadow of my family's expectations. The more success I found, the less power Chloe's words had. I got a raise, then another. People at work began to look up to me, and I discovered that leadership wasn't about being loud or cutting others down. It was about patience, empathy, and quiet strength. Qualities Chloe had mocked in me my whole life became the very reasons I excelled. But here's the part that really changed things. I stopped chasing their approval. I didn't call to update them on every milestone. I didn't seek validation from people who had never given it freely. I lived my life, built my world, and for the first time, I felt free. Of course, freedom comes with a cost. The less I played their game, the more Chloe tried to bait me. At one family gathering months later, when Ethan and I showed up in our new car, Chloe smirked and said, "Wow, Liam must have finally begged his boss hard enough for a raise." The old me would have laughed nervously, tried to shrug it off. The new me just smiled and said, "Or maybe I earned it." Then I walked away. Her face froze for a second, just a flicker, but I caught it. She wasn't used to me standing tall. She wasn't used to me refusing to play the role of the family clown. And that flicker, that tiny crack in her armor, told me something important. She knew she was losing control. That realization lit a fire in me. For years, Chloe had fed off my reactions, my silence, my hurt, my attempts to defend myself. But now, I wasn't giving her any of that. And without it, she had nothing. It was liberating. The man who once stood in the bathroom, gripping the sink and wondering why he was even there, had been replaced by someone who knew exactly where he belonged, with the people who respected him, who valued him, who didn't measure his worth by how small he could be made. But if I thought Chloe would accept that shift quietly, I was wrong. People like her don't surrender power. They fight harder, dig deeper, and push boundaries further. And soon enough, she crossed a line so bold, so unforgivable, it turned everything on its head. The shift in me didn't go unnoticed. Chloe could feel it, even if she'd never admit it. Every time we saw each other, her comments got sharper, more pointed, as if she were desperate to pull me back into the role I'd abandoned. But the more she pushed, the more I stayed steady. That balance unnerved her. She couldn't stand that I wasn't playing anymore. It all came to a head the following summer. Ethan and I had invited my parents and Chloe over for a small barbecue at our condo. It wasn't something I particularly wanted, but Ethan convinced me it was worth trying to host for once, to show them the life we'd built on our terms. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see if being on my ground would make a difference. From the moment Chloe walked through the door, she made herself at home. She wandered the condo like she was appraising it, her eyes flicking to the furniture, the artwork, the little touches Ethan and I had carefully chosen. "Nice place," she said finally, her tone polite, but her smirk betraying her. "Didn't think you'd ever manage something like this." I smiled evenly. Hard work pays off. Ethan, who had been manning the grill on the balcony, stepped inside just then. His presence filled the room instantly. Chloe froze for half a second before covering it with another smirk. She always acted tougher than she was, but Ethan had a way of cutting through facades without saying a word. He simply greeted everyone, then went back outside, calm and unbothered. The evening went as expected. Chloe dominated the conversation. My parents fawned over her, and I played host with Ethan at my side. But then, as the night wound down, Chloe cornered me in the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So, Liam," she began, her tone casual, "you're doing pretty well for yourself these days. New place, new car. Good job. Must be nice." I knew that tone. It was the setup before the strike. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I've worked hard for it." She tilted her head, her smirk widening. "Which is why I think you should help me out. You know, since you've got all this success now." I raised an eyebrow. "Help you out?" She nodded. "I've been thinking about buying a house, but with interest rates and all, it's tough. You could co-sign for me. It wouldn't be a big deal. Just your name on some papers. You make good money. You'd qualify easily. And it's only fair since mom and dad can't do it." My stomach dropped, but not from fear, from recognition. This was it. The moment I realized Chloe still saw me as someone she could manipulate, someone she could corner into serving her needs. "Chloe," I said slowly, "you want me to co-sign a mortgage for you?" She waved her hand like it was nothing. "Come on. It's not like you'd actually be paying anything. Just your name. Think of it as helping family. You wouldn't want to be selfish, would you?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Selfish. That was the label she was trying to pin on me now. The way she always had a label ready. Dramatic, clumsy, weak. And she knew our parents would back her if I refused. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't the same person she used to push around. I had something she didn't expect: leverage. Because while Chloe saw me as the same brother she'd mocked at holiday dinners, the world outside our family saw me differently. I'd been promoted again at work, this time to a position that gave me authority over budgets, hiring, and high-profile projects. My reputation had grown. People sought me out for advice, respected my judgment, trusted me. I wasn't the weak link anymore. I was in a powerful position, not just in my career, but in my life. And standing there in my kitchen, with Chloe trying to wrap me back into her web, I realized I didn't have to say yeah. I didn't even have to argue. I could use her own words, her own entitlement, to set up something she would never see coming. I met her smirk with a calm smile. "I'll think about it." Her eyes lit up, misinterpreting my tone as compliance. "Great. I knew you'd come around. I'll send you the details once I find the place." But what she didn't realize was that her request had given me exactly what I needed. For years, Chloe had played her game in the safety of our parents' approval, knowing they'd always back her. But now, she was asking for something real, something legal, something binding. And in that ask, she handed me the leverage I'd been waiting for, the opportunity to flip the script and show her what it felt like to be powerless. Ethan stepped back into the kitchen just then, his eyes flicking between us. He didn't say a word, but the way he looked at me steady, questioning, told me he'd sensed the shift. I just gave him the smallest nod. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving Chloe's games. I was preparing to win. When Chloe left that night, she was practically glowing. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger, just like always. I didn't challenge her, didn't call her out, didn't deny her request. I simply told her I'd think about it. To Chloe, that sounded like victory. To me, it was the first chess piece moved in a game I'd been quietly preparing for years. Over the next few weeks, she began texting me listings of houses she could totally see herself in. Each one was more extravagant than the last. Sprawling suburban homes with manicured lawns, open kitchens, and price tags that made my head spin. "This one's perfect," she wrote once. "All I need is you to sign. Then I can finally start living the life I deserve." That last word stuck with me. Deserve. Chloe had always believed she was entitled to more. Not because she worked harder, but because she saw herself as the star of the family. My role, according to her, was to orbit around her, supporting her shine. But now, she was stepping into my world, the world of contracts, finances, and responsibilities. And unlike family dinners, that world had rules. So I played along. I asked her questions about the houses she liked. I pretended to weigh the pros and cons. I let her believe I was seriously considering it. Each time we talked, her confidence grew. She even bragged to my parents about how I was finally doing something useful for her. Mom praised me for being such a good brother. Dad said it was about time I pulled my weight. Every word only hardened my resolve. Behind the scenes, I spoke with a colleague of mine, someone who handled property law. I didn't go into details about Chloe. I just asked general questions about co-signing, about what protections existed, about how legally binding such commitments could be. The more I learned, the clearer it became. Chloe wasn't just asking me for a favor. She was asking me to put my financial future in her hands, knowing full well she'd drive it into the ground if it meant getting what she wanted. That's when I decided if she wanted to play this game, I'd let her. But she wouldn't like how it ended. A month later, Chloe found a house she fell in love with. She sent me dozens of photos, gushing about the walk-in closets, the massive backyard, the perfect space for entertaining. Then came the call. "So, Liam," she said, her tone dripping with triumph. "Ready to make this official? The bank just needs your information. I told them you'd be signing. They're expecting you." I could hear the smugness in her voice. She wasn't even asking anymore. She was demanding. "Sure," I said evenly. "Why don't we set up a meeting? That way, we can go over everything together. I don't want any surprises." Chloe laughed, thinking she'd already won. "Perfect. Let's meet at Mom and Dad's this weekend. That way, everyone can see how generous you're being." And just like that, she gave me the perfect stage. That Saturday, we gathered at my parents' house. Chloe had the paperwork printed out, her smile wide, her voice animated as she described how amazing her new life was going to be once I signed. My parents beamed with pride, nodding along, praising her ambition. Then she slid the papers across the table toward me. "All you have to do is sign right here," she said, tapping the page. The room went quiet, all eyes on me. I picked up the papers, flipping through them slowly. Chloe leaned forward, impatience flickering across her face. Finally, I set the papers down and looked her in the eye. "Chloe, do you even understand what this means?" Co-signing isn't just putting my name on a page. If you default, if you miss payments, I'm the one on the hook. This could destroy my credit, my finances, my future. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, stop being dramatic. You're doing fine. It's not like you'll ever actually have to pay. I'll handle it. You just need to help me get approved. My parents nodded, echoing her words. She's right, Liam, Mom said. You've always been the responsible one. This is just you helping family. And that's when I struck. I leaned back, my tone calm but sharp. Funny, because I actually talked to a lawyer about this. Do you know what happens when someone defaults on a mortgage with a cosigner? The cosigner loses everything. Their credit tanks, their assets are at risk. And if the borrower runs, the cosigner carries the full weight. Sound familiar, Chloe? Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? I slid a separate document across the table. Not the mortgage papers, but a summary printout of everything I'd researched. Clear, simple terms outlining exactly what co-signing meant and what it would cost me if she failed. I tapped the page. This isn't just a signature. This is handing over my stability, my hard work, my future, all to someone who's done nothing but tear me down since we were kids. The room fell silent. My parents' smiles faded, confusion etched on their faces. Chloe's smirk evaporated, replaced by a tight, nervous twitch. Look, Liam, she stammered. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just paperwork. No, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the room. It's my life, and I'm not putting it in your hand. Not now. Not ever. For the first time, Chloe didn't have a comeback. She sat frozen, her face flushed, her confidence slipping away. And then Ethan, who had been silent until that moment, leaned forward. His voice was low, steady, commanding. He said, "No, that's the end of it." The weight of his words filled the room. Nobody laughed. Nobody smirked. For once, Chloe wasn't the center of power. I didn't sign the papers. And in that moment, I saw the fear in her eyes, fear that her game was unraveling, that she no longer had control. Chloe's face went red, the smirk gone, her composure unraveling like thread pulled from a sweater. She pushed the papers back toward me, her voice rising. "You can't do this to me, Liam. You promised." "I never promised." I cut in, my tone calm but final. "I said I'd think about it, and I did." My answer is no. The silence in the room was sharp enough to cut glass. My parents shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. Dad finally spoke, his voice tense. "Liam, don't be selfish. Your sister's future depends on this. Family helps family." I looked directly at him, years of swallowed pain crystallizing into steel. Family doesn't exploit family. Family doesn't laugh at your pain, mock your achievements, or try to ruin your stability for their gain. I've spent my entire life being the punchline at this table. Not anymore. Chloe slammed her hand against the table, her voice shrill. "You owe me. You've always had it easier." That was the moment Ethan stood. His chair scraped back slowly, deliberately, and the room froze. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone silenced her. He fixed Chloe with that steady, unblinking stare, the one I'd seen break down recruits in training. "Liam owes you nothing. If you can't understand that, then you don't deserve to sit at this table." Chloe blinked rapidly, stunned. For the first time in her life, she had no witty retort, no mocking laugh. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her bravado crumbling in front of everyone. Mom tried to recover, her voice wavering. "Let's just calm down. We can talk this through." But I shook my head. "There's nothing left to talk about. You've shown me over and over where I stand in this family, and now I'm showing you where I stand. I'm done being your scapegoat." I stood too, Ethan rising with me, his hand slipping into mine. "We're leaving," I said simply. Chloe tried one last attempt, her voice cracking. "If you walk out, don't bother coming back." I paused at the doorway, turning just enough to meet her eyes. My voice was steady, firm, final. "That's the first thing you've said tonight that makes sense." And then I walked out. The fallout was swift. Chloe lost the house she wanted. She couldn't get approved without a cosigner, and word spread among relatives about her meltdown. Her image, the one she'd polished for years, began to crack. Some cousins stopped siding with her, tired of the drama. My parents tried to guilt-trip me with phone calls, but I kept my boundaries firm. No meant no, and for the first time in my life, they were forced to accept it. Meanwhile, my life kept rising. Work flourished. Ethan and I traveled. We built a life defined not by their approval, but by our own happiness. The more distance I put between myself and Chloe's chaos, the clearer everything became. Months later, at another family gathering I chose not to attend, Chloe reportedly complained that things just aren't the same without Liam. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been treated as expendable. But the moment I walked away, they felt the void. That Christmas, as Ethan and I decorated our own tree in the quiet warmth of our home, he slipped his arms around me and whispered, "You finally took back your place." I smiled, the glow of the lights reflecting in his eyes. No, I finally claimed it. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own story. I felt like the author. The last laugh wasn't Chloe's. It was mine, silent, steady, and undeniable.